Thank you very much. Our next session will discuss macro shifts in a complex world. We will be joined by Sir Brandon Lewis, Lord Dominic Johnson of Lanison, and Sylvia Pavoni, Editor-in-Chief at The Banker, for a special fireside chat. Let me just give you some of their background. Sylvia, as I said, is the Editor-in-Chief of The Banker and is in charge of all editorial aspects of the publication. She joined the Financial Times Group in 2005 and was most recently the founding editor of Sustainable Views, a service for sustainability professionals. Sylvia has also worked on a number of non-profit initiatives supporting female leadership. Sir Brandon Lewis served in the UK government for over a decade, holding senior roles, including Secretary of State for Justice, Northern Ireland, and Policing. A barrister by training, he played a key role in the accession ceremony of King Charles III and led justice reforms and international legal cooperation. Since stepping down as an MP into 2024, he's taken on strategic and advisory roles across global business and remains very active in public policy. And earlier this year, he was honoured as a Good Fellow at the Swiffy Fort in Dubai, a testament to his ongoing leadership and impact. And Lord Johnson is the co-chairman of the Conservative and Unionist Party. He's held several ministerial roles, including Minister of State in the Department for Business and Trade. He brings over 25 years of experience in global financial services. A co-founder of Somerset Capital Management, he has long championed investment in emerging markets, and we're honoured to have him with us today. Please welcome our speakers to the stage.
Welcome. In 15 minutes, we're going to talk about geopolitics, the economy, and why anyone would want to invest in the UK, and what the UK can do to actually convince everyone to come and spend some money and time in this country. So an easy task, very easy task. Where shall we start? Shall we start from what you feel the UK is perhaps not doing right yet? Dominic, shall I start with you?
Yes. Well, firstly, thanks very much for inviting me here. This is such an important conference. I think the Sovereign Wealth Institute is a very, very important and energising entity. So congratulations for coming together. And I'm very excited we're in the Mansion House. I mean, I think that the UK, and Brandon, I'm sure will agree with me, I think we all agree with ourselves on this, is still an exceptional place to invest in structural terms. You know, we're in the middle of the City of London, the oldest financial centre in the world, still the international capital of finance. The UK has all the right structures which give it an advantage over, frankly, most other economies in terms of rule of law and structural access. I mean, I think that what worries me is sort of twofold. And I try to say this apolitically, but the government is simply not doing enough to make the sorts of reforms that will make our economy more attractive. And frustratingly, I think for investors, they're doing many of the things that they shouldn't be doing. So they're making it harder to employ people or harder to have flexibility around employment, and they're increasing friction around taxes. But there are huge opportunities in terms of infrastructure and building that they are very determined to push through. So I think as investors, you have to look at where you're going to have political gains and losses. When it comes to taxation and employment, you're going to have fundamental losses and higher friction. When it comes to other principles, i.e. centrally directed activity, such as building an infrastructure, you could actually have a phenomenal wave of opportunity, as indeed you saw under the rather unpopular, the PPP or whatever it was classified as in the end, public-private partnerships, which got a bad name, but actually I think they were very successful in crowding investment into the economy.
All right, thank you so much. So employment, taxation, two big issues that you think will have to be addressed. Is this something new, Brandon, or is it something that previous governments have also perhaps failed to address properly?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair point. And Dominic and I both served in the previous government, and what I would say, I think we need to be really honest with ourselves, particularly over the last couple of years of the last Conservative government. We made changes post-Brexit. You would imagine that having left the European Union, the UK would want to take advantage of the opportunities that creates. Lower regulation potentially, certainly lower tax, to be super competitive and to attract more business into the UK. Instead, we ended up in a situation where one of our neighbours with a land border in Ireland, for example, has better and lower tax, more attractive tax regime than we do in the UK, which is crazy. And we created a situation that started this ebb of wealth away from the UK. Now, the current government, as Dominic has outlined, has kind of then turbocharged that. So we're now seeing more millionaires leave the UK than at any point. And, you know, I know the UAE has had about 1,000 people a day since Christmas moved to the UAE. And that loss of wealth from the UK, we're seeing it in the London property market. You're seeing it in spend, particularly in London. But at the same time, I do agree with Dominic, the UK's still got the potential to be a very attractive place to invest. Partly because as that comes through, then if you're looking at property, particularly obviously the prices are going lower and lower in London, which always creates opportunity, but also because despite this government moving up tax and the new employment laws, which are going to make it very difficult for businesses, there is still a structural advantage in the UK. We still have the time zone, we still have the rule of law. Something like 65 to 67% of all international business transactions are in UK law. So UK legal services is still an absolute front leader for the wider UK economy and a reason to do business here. And the City of London itself is at the heart of that, particularly with the new law courts that we've got to sort of highlight that presence. So there's still a lot of opportunity in the UK. And as Dominic said, and I spend a lot of time in the property sector, you know, if you're looking at property and infrastructure, that is going to be a boom time because this current government needs to see economic growth. They're focusing most of their time and effort towards infrastructure and housing being part of that. So there will be opportunities there.
Okay, so you mentioned real estate, Dominic. Did you want to add something?
I think as international investors, you've got a huge opportunity in terms of what I call the English discount, because we're too polite and we're quite risk averse. And so if you look at something like the defence sector, where unequivocally we're going to see huge amounts of capital be invested, and the British defence sector is sensational. At the second tier down, we have some great primes, which are world class, but also we have a whole myriad, and I saw this as Defence Exports Minister, of little companies. And frankly, they're unrealistically cheap. For a few £1 million, you could go and buy a company that in America would be sort of nearing that multi-$100 million sort of price model. So there are huge opportunities also in the university spin-out sector, which is struggling to attract enough capital, but the ideas there are phenomenal. And the constant story is you have a brilliant idea from Oxford or Cambridge or wherever, and then they go off to America. So if you're looking for sort of staggering opportunities, they're huge in the UK still, because the intellectual capital is very strong.
And particularly if you pick up, I mean, actually, a good example I saw, I think it was yesterday, but certainly this week, an interview with the Defence Secretary. John Healey's a good guy, but he couldn't even tell anybody how much the new submarines are going to cost, which means there's a lot of opportunity to bid for that business still. So there's a lot of defence opportunity, but I think particularly in the UK, one of the things I hear a lot, I spend a lot of time in the UAE and the US, and the thing I hear a lot is the UK is still pretty much leading the way in things like around research, whether it's biotech or cyber. We're still a front runner for research. What we're not so good at, and that creates opportunity, as Dominic said, is how to then apply that, how to develop it and actually have it applied. You know, the award for the most entrepreneurial university in the UK, several years running now, is Queen's in Belfast. And the rollouts from there in both cyber, AI tech and in biotech is absolutely superb. But again, lots of small things that can be scaled up very quickly with the right investment. So there are big opportunities right across that sort of corridor from Northern Ireland, particularly Oxford and Cambridge as well.
This is all absolutely fascinating. So just keeping an eye on the clock. So defence I would like to go back to, but also transferring that academic knowledge plus and translating that into actual investments and entrepreneurship. So defence, only yesterday, it was actually at a Financial Times event, Rachel Reeves indicated that the funding for defence would not exceed 2.6% of GDP in this parliament. Is that sufficient to attract investment in the defence supply chains? Is more going to be needed?
Well, I mean, Brandon can answer this question as well. The world has changed. And what I realised sitting in government, looking at our defence establishment, is actually we've got the whole way to go. I think there was a very high degree, certainly amongst me as a citizen, that we had a phenomenal defence capability, enormous stores of ammunition, the greatest and most modern technology. And it turns out we don't, and very few countries do. So the opportunity for a complete reinvestment process in defence is happening now. So for me, it's not about the percentages of GDP. I mean, they're not meaningless because obviously you need to spend a lot of money. But who can here tell me whether it should be 2.6, 2.7, 2.5? It's not the argument. The point is that money is going to be spent very differently. Up until quite recently, it went on, people, buildings and tanks, etc., things that have driven around. And in the next few years, it's going to be on technology. It's going to be on new upgrades of nuclear capabilities. It's going to be on unmanned military technology and all the rest of it. So the wave of a new type of investment is what's important. Not just buying more bullets for the rifle invented in the 80s. It's a whole new horizon, and that's why defence in the UK is quite exciting.
Okay, thank you. Talking about entrepreneurship, so a lot of knowledge, lots of ideas, a lot of people coming here to study and potentially to stay and set up new companies. I'm sure that more can be done to help them get funding and also create a sort of an exit path. And I'm thinking about, capital markets, listing. And the UK hasn't really done as well as other centres internationally. So what is needed? Are investors just sort of giving up on the UK as the prime destination for example, investing? As you can imagine, the banker will look at financial services, fintechs, neobanks. They tend to look elsewhere for a potential listing.
So look, I'll pick this one up. To his great credit, Dominic spent a fair bit of time as our trade minister going around the world selling UK PLC absolutely brilliantly, and I used to get it fed back consistently how the great job Dominic did. But the challenge that someone like Dominic has in that role, and any minister has in that role, I think, is one of those things that you get to the bottom of later in your period in government. And this was highlighted. A very good friend of mine and Dominic's, Lord Richard Harrington, has done the Harrington Review into foreign direct investment. And the fundamental thing he found, and I've seen this in my work in the UAE, the contrast, is when you come to invest in the UK, who do you speak to? Depending on what sector you're in, do you speak to the Department of Defence, the Department of Business, the Treasury, the Department of Science, or the Cabinet Office, or a local council, and you've got this myriad of people to deal with. And serious foreign investors find that immensely frustrating, too much of a mishmash to deal with, it's too complicated, and they go where there is a concierge service that makes it easier. If you go and invest in the UAE, and I'm on the board of a company, the biggest NASDAQ listed company in the UAE, what we find, and I know other investors I work with there find, is when you go to the UAE, the Department for the Economy in Dubai, for example, and Tourism will basically give you a concierge service. They make it easy to make those contacts, to get what you need done. To see more investment here in the UK, we need to create that kind of environment. Okay. And we need to also make sure that it is a very open, welcoming place for business to not just open, but also to grow and develop. And that means having an employment law that actually is flexible enough for businesses to be able to flex and grow when they need to, recognise that certain industries go in cycles, and you have to reflect that. The current government is not doing that, and that's going to be a real challenge.
All right, so concierge service, relatively easy potentially to set up. Employment law, maybe tougher. But Dominic, you're also talking about capital markets, raising funds therefore as well. What would you do to improve the appeal of the UK as an investment destination? Well,
I mean, I would encourage everyone to come and base their investment funds in the UK. I think the opportunities, particularly on the venture level, so not the private equity, but the lower levels, are just enormous. I think it's so cheap. You've got the intellectual capital. 4 of the top universities in the world, which basically means half of them are based in the UK. It's completely extraordinary that. There are none in Asia, Africa, Latin America. That's not a good thing. But it does remind you, where is the intellectual capital? What are you investing in if you're not just investing in big, energy projects or whatever they may be? They're actually in the UK, far and away ahead of the rest of Europe. I always said if you took a hot air balloon up into the sky and you looked down on England on a beautiful day like today, you would see herds of unicorns thundering across our green pastures with the sunlight glinting off their golden horns and hoofs, because we have more of these companies, people forget this, than the rest of Europe combined. So we talk ourselves down. There's always talk of not enough, we could do more. We all know that, but actually still the basic template for operation and good investment opportunities is in the UK. And the government, for all the faults on the sort of socialist side, which I think is an issue, understand the only way they're going to stay in is by ensuring there's economic growth. And so they're going to make very sure that the areas where they do want to see success, such as infrastructure, investment at the lower levels, property and defence, that they're going to be absolutely phenomenally behind you if you want to invest in that.
And can I ask as a last question, given the time, how tough is it to focus on the details of attracting investments in this country when everything else is up in the air? Everything is being rewritten in terms of international relations, trade, war. How difficult is it from a government perspective, but also in your roles to focus on specific details of trying to make a business work, an investment work?
Well, I'll Brandon, you go first, and I just want to have a little.
Well, I would say actually, that's one of the reasons why I think the UK is one of the better places to be looking to invest, because actually the UK is pretty stable. You know, you've got a government with a clear majority. Now, Dominic and I might have a lot of disagreements with individual policies this government's doing, but it's got a clear majority, so you've got stability and knowledge. And one of the most important things I found with business is even if a government's making a decision business doesn't like, it wants to know that it's going to be a stable decision, so it can then plan. And in the UK, you do have that stability. You also do have, as I said earlier on, I would argue the world's best legal services system. And that is hugely important to business because everything needs contracts and legal work done. We really are still the best in the world at that. And when you put that together with the time zone, with the currency, the rule of law generally, this is still a very key place to invest. And there is, as Dominic rightly says, looking across the universities, looking across what small businesses are doing, such huge opportunity to find those small businesses that can be scaled up to become the next unicorn of the future. There's pretty much nowhere else in the world that can offer that on the scale with the complexity and the amount of opportunity of all these different strings coming together in one place. It is the UK.
Before I ask Dominic, what is the one thing that this government is doing right? You were saying that you don't always agree with Dominic about policy.
There's a lot of things I would argue, and I'm sure Dominic will as well. I touched on employment law, what they're doing on taxes, all of which makes it harder for business. And certain big businesses have moved to Ireland rather than the UK because they've got a corporation tax half the UK, for example. But one of the things they are very clear, they need to see economic growth. In a democracy and with the commitments they've made, they have to show economic growth by the next general election. Infrastructure and housing is the easiest way for them to see that. If you look at the GDP of the UK since the Second World War and look at a chart, construction and house building moves and shadows with GDP. They follow in tandem. This government knows that. They're engaging with those sectors more than pretty much any other sector. If you're looking to invest, the opportunities there and the changes they're making on supply side reforms, they're not doing enough on the demand side, but they're doing a lot on demand side, meaning that that industry is likely to grow. It has a big opportunity. It's excited about it. It's a good investment opportunity.
I mean, I was reminded of a speech. Anyone from Dubai here? Hands up, anyone from Dubai? No? I was reminded of a great speech that Sheikh Mohammed gave a while back about building Dubai. And he said that if he had not done anything each time someone had said you can't do it because there's an oil crisis or there's a geopolitical tension or there's an issue with Iran or whatever it is, he said we would have remained where we were, which was with one hotel on the main street when I took over this country 50 years ago or whatever. I think that's and I heard this yesterday, someone was repeating it to me. I think that's a very, very good point. Ultimately, you have a good direction of travel in the UK because the structures are sound. You've got a phenomenal population with human capital. We've got issues over politics, but as Brandon said, if you get the right sectors under a Labour government, you can do extremely well, as you've seen in the past. You just have to pick a bit more strategically. And ultimately, in our society, we are a centre-right country, and we want economic growth. And the politicians know that of whatever stripe. And so, as far as you're concerned as investors, there's a realisation that without you, people can't get re-elected. And so you're always ultimately going to have a long-term good case to invest in the UK.
I'll just say as we close, sort of mirroring a point Dominic opened with, which is I want to say a huge thank you to the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute, Lakshmi, and the whole team, Ed and the team, bringing this together, and all of you for being here. It's good for the UK, it's great for London to have you here looking at the opportunities, but also I appreciate, having been involved with the SWFI for a fair few years now, I think the last time I was with some of you was in Sharjah actually just a few months ago. One of the things you do see in the UAE, as Dominic rightly outlined, is there is a clear vision for where they want to go, but there's also that clear focus on long-term investments. I'm very fortunate, I work with an investment fund that looks very much long-term, not short-term. And again, if you're looking at the UK, the benefit that funds like yourselves generally bring to the table is that patient capital, the ability to look long term. There's opportunities all around the world, but being here in the UK, I would say there are some unique opportunities here at a particular moment in time that, as Dominic said, mean good opportunities for all of you. And these events, I think, are a superb chance for everybody to come together. And I just want to say a big thank you to the entire SWFI team for putting this on and bringing you all together in a way that is good, hopefully, for all of your investment opportunities, but also particularly from Dominic and I's point of view and our colleagues, the rest of the UK and the City of London. So thank you, and to the SWFI.
Well said. Very good.
All right, so we're ending on a very positive note. Thank you.